were able to get them to agree to a later date, which was, I believe, April 11th. We still disagree. Nevertheless, that's not the hill we're going to die on. So that's why we have these recommendations in front of us today. I do want to add a couple of things that have come up, just so everybody knows about the process concerns. I want everyone to know that the PAB hears what the community is saying. We're all volunteers. We've worked very, very diligently to hear from you all in multiple ways, multiple fora. We have tried to provide translation services, again, thanks to the help of the community. We've put out different ways for people to engage with us, and you all have. Thank you. There are many things that are completely outside of our purview. They're completely outside of our control. Those include what systems we have here, what sort of support the city provides for us. So we can't, we've tried to push back. We've tried to ask that of the city. We've asked that of city council. We hear you in the comments. That is not, that's not something we have control over. We're trying our best. There were some snafus with posting some of these things. As the chair said earlier, we did post these minutes and we sent these minutes as well as these documents to the city well in advance. We requested that they post them. It fell into a long weekend and the city said that these were honest mistakes that were not posted on the website. The city did ask for patience from the board, which you have, along with the hopes that perhaps one day one of these honest mistakes will actually benefit the board as opposed to disadvantage it. We are still here to work in good faith and do our due diligence. And we understand that the city staff are also, their hands are a little bit tied as well. So if you want more services for us, talk to the mayor, talk to your council people. We are trying. Okay, back to options 1 and option 2. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? For you were part of the committee? Okay. So I think at this point, we're going to move on to public comments. And then from then, we will ask the PD representatives that are here to come up for some questions. And then we will move on to make a motion. For those of you that came late or just don't know, if you want to submit a comment, there are slips right in the back by the door there. Fill out the slip and put it in this little box right by where the microphone is. That's how you provide your public comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pega, and the First Pass Committee. Sit tight, we've got quite a few comments. We're going to go ahead and announce a couple. So we'll start with Keith, followed by Nena Okwagu, followed by Diego Bethia, followed by Seth Hall and Jacob Lurton. It's Keith, followed by Nena, Diego, Seth, and Jacob. Yeah, if you could come and get close to the microphone when you hear your name come up, that'd make this process a little more quick. Thank you. Keith, with no last name. If he's not here, we'll have Nena.
There is a grave concern that these smart streetlights pose. The honest truth is that smart streetlight surveillance imposes on the democratic and personal right to privacy, and also is simply not what the community needs. The Black population is already suffering tremendously from over-policing and are overrepresented in prison system, and the installation of smart surveillance will enable police and law enforcement to harass, imprison, and ultimately harm Black and Brown communities by pushing discriminatory agendas. 43 deficiencies is what the Privacy Advisory Board has noted. That in itself already shows that smart streetlight surveillance is detrimental to community members. Lastly, the social contract states that us as community are willing to give up some of our rights for the sake of protection. But when us as a community are telling you that this is a right that many of us are not willing to give up because of the repeated abuse and negative results, I hope you listen and do not endorse this ordinance.
Hello, everyone. This is for streetlights. It has been estimated that these streetlights would be costing $4 million, $4 million coming from the city's general funds and grants. This money could be used for other purposes as the SD Trust SD Coalition stated, as well as supporting the homeless community, which is currently being pushed out of several areas. So $4 million could be built a homeless shelter, or to provide mental health services to get people into working jobs so they can care for themselves. We can also not ignore that there could be an economic benefit behind this, issuing tickets, issuing people to go to jail to support the modern day slavery. Thank you.
I'm Jacob Certain from District 3, and I support option 2 for all its stated reasons. The streetlight project is already a failure, and we should let it die. SDPD originally snuck these in behind council's backs and installed them with strategic racism. After an area wrist slap, SDPD wants to double down. We're still paying millions each year for streetlights that provide no civic benefit, right? Now we're being told, oh, just another couple million per year, and maybe we'll get a crumb of utility. But that crumb sacrifices privacy and civil rights. The sales pitch from SDPD handweighs digital masking, but two problems. First, SDPD systemically fails to care about privacy and civil rights. Remember when they used streetlights to spy on mosques because of Islam? Second, research by police officers, sociologists, and the FBI tells us that 40% of cops self-report that they have been physically violent with their spouse in the last 6 months. This is a domestic violence rate 15 times higher than the general population. Will a bad apple cop be able to use this technology to stalk and harass their partner? What measures does the city have outside the police department to hold the users of this technology, police, accountable? Does this technology prevent crime? In cities where it's used, has crime dropped? Has it dropped because of streetlights? Will it have any effect in
Thank you.
San Diego?
Seth Hall, followed by Elizabeth Efford, Lon, and Stacy.
Thank you. I just ask that you guys take the community's perceptions into your minds, but ultimately you're here to make expert advice, and each of you has expertise. And I think that the city council deserves advice from each of you that is deeply imbued with your expertise. You're not called here to make political decisions, and honestly, whether this system gets acquired or not is not your decision. You've been called here to give expert advice. Some of you are community experts, some of you are technology experts and experts in other areas. And I think it's very important that you consider yourself in that expert role that you often find yourself in, and you determine, is this the proposal that you recommend? This is the one with all of its issues, with all of the community pushback? This is what we're going to recommend to our city leaders. And whether that's true, I hope that you really use your own expertise to decide. Thank you.
Lon, followed by Stacy, Michael White, and Ruben.
I asked the board to ensure your response to the department's proposal is based on independent facts and not baseless claims or sales pitch language. The department writes in its policies that the tools are very effective in combating crime. This language makes absolutely no sense when cameras merely captures an event as it unfolds. Images of crime happening has been shown to the public to cause fear in people since the 70s or 80s. How do you think those images were captured? It was through these cameras. And now fast forward 2023, here we are proposing millions of dollars for more cameras that are ineffective in preventing crime. Those millions can go to better use, community-based programs and resources that has proven to be effective in preventing crime. More resources, less crime. And that there is facts. Why would we want to wait for crime to happen and capture it when we should be investing in much-needed resources? We should be focusing our energy and money in prevention. If we go through with these cameras, it'll never end. Soon our whole lives would just be a big reality show for us behind the cameras to watch and be entertained.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Stacy. As a member of Asian Solidarity Collective, I am in solidarity with the migrant communities of Chula Vista who have been subjected to this license plate technology and put at risk of ICE deportation because of it. I ask the board to come up with its own justification for why ALPR is the most privacy conscious way to protect San Diegans. I also ask you to reject this proposal and base your decisions on the experiences of the people and organizations who have been directly affected by this surveillance. The neighborhoods that will be targeted by these systems need resources for housing, mental health, youth drop-in centers, not cameras. And there are organizations in this room now already doing this work with whatever scraps that they can find. So you have the ability to give them what they need to prevent crime, truly. SDPD only knows how to protect corporations, and people with money and power give these resources to the people who know how to protect their communities. Thank you.
Michael White, followed by Ruben and Cabrera, Blair, and then Francis.
Hello, my name is Michael White, and I'm a community member, and I'm in opposition to the street cameras. There's just too many different loopholes in it. I have several issues with it. There's no transparency for the public. There's a loophole that allows SDPD to hide critical information from city council. That's super scary. If they're hiding information from city council, just think what they're hiding from the community. And the last but not least, the invasion of privacy. I have 3 daughters. And if a street camera is set up on a light and it just so happens to be, I live on a cul-de-sac, and it just so happens to be going into my teenage daughter's rooms, that's really scary. I don't know who's on the end of that camera looking at my daughters getting dressed or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So I'm in opposition for the street cameras. Please don't put them up.
Good evening. My name is Ruben Cabrera. I am part of District number 5. Number 4, right? Oh, anyways, I am a big part of Southeast San Diego. I have lots of family here. I was born and raised in these streets. I feel like the streetlights, the smart lights, I feel like it's definitely an invasion of our privacy. I feel like they have enough to be able to surveillance us as much as they need to. And the truth is, I really feel like that in my heart of hearts, I want to believe that it would be something that could protect us even more. But the truth is, out of all of my cousins and family that are running these streets and all the killing and everything that's going on, I would wish that it would help it, but I don't trust them. I feel like I just feel like they're going to use it to their benefit and not to our benefit. So I'm totally against it. It's an invasion of our privacy. And I just hope that you guys hear us out today. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Blair, followed by Francis, Joey Patuka, Michelle Thompson.
Hi, Blair Beekman. It's my real hope that we work on a better overall knowledge and understanding of all the tech that's available and being used in San Diego. I think that can develop a better way to understand our issues here in San Diego. Like, for instance, we can better talk about new asks of 375 ALPRs. I think we can bring that down to 250 at least. Good luck in those efforts. I think we have to make a real important effort to ask city government for more honest reporting in their public meeting process of all this surveillance tech we're talking about. They do not know how to talk about this stuff honestly and openly. It's sad. To work on those sort of issues is an important concept we could develop here. And finally, I hope we can work towards more open public policies when local government wants to experiment with the surveillance tech. I think that's an interesting concept to look into and to understand and work towards, and how to talk to the police about current issues you're working on. Thank you.
I know, I have a minute being donated to me. Could we
Go
start
ahead.
the clock from 2 minutes? Okay, thank you. I'm Frances Yasmin Motiwala with Activist San Diego, a member of the Trust SD Coalition. My concerns, I have several concerns and propose that you should not pass this, grant the police this request. Unequal enforcement is a major concern of mine. I've driven through Barrio Logan and I've noticed how many cops there are everywhere. And if you drive through La Jolla, there's not, or other parts of wealthier neighborhoods, you see that there is unequal enforcement happening. We also have seen police use surveillance video to monitor protected speech and assembly of protests, which is a major concern. And we've even seen the police side and protect white supremacist and hate groups while putting unequal enforcement on protesters opposing them. I also am very concerned that this, in particular, the company Ubicquia is a venture capital backed company whose venture capitalists are very profit driven. And if you look at the website Glassdoor, where people have worked at the company, here's some comments that former employees have made, that they're extremely unprofessional and discriminatory. A lack of female employees feels like a boys' club, often predatory comments from senior staff, intimidation instead of support, an absolutely toxic environment, toxic and abusive leadership. One comment, they suggest advice to management is that they should stop their slimy business practices, stop lying to customers, stop lying to government regulatory bodies, quit being dishonest. And so I do, support, someone just said that to prevent crime, we got to provide resources to the community. Thank you.
Joey, followed by Michelle Ascari. It says Rocco.
Hello, my name is Joey Patuka. I'm a member of the 4th District. I'm opposed to the cameras. I think there should be more transparency. There's not enough time for everybody to have a moderate say in this. I think more people need to know about this. I barely found out, and I don't think this is a good way of the government to be watching or people to be watched. It's invasion of our privacy. Somebody needs to be accountable, and I don't feel the people who are doing it are trustworthy. That's all I got.
Ascari, followed by Rocco, Kiana, and Bill.
My colleagues will tell you that when a question is in front of me that I don't understand, there's a certain look on my face. And I think I have that look on my face right now. I'm wondering what board would allow a police department to come to them and say, I'm going to show you up front that I am not going to be transparent, and then ask us to give them unfettered surveillance capabilities. What board would allow that? It's mind-boggling that these people would come with this kind of program. They would say, when you ask us to come and speak about what our concerns are, we are going to ignore you. But trust us when we tell you that we're not going to misuse this technology. What government agency has not misused technology that it was given? Or we have somebody now have some kind of expectation that San Diego PD is the exception. I had another minute seated.
Okay.
So I'm saying to you that I don't have to stand here and tell you I don't trust the San Diego Police Department to do the right thing. They don't trust you to know what they're going to do with the technology. So you have no ability to do your job. The job that you volunteered for, the job that you were appointed on this board to do, you have no ability to do that job because they have told you up front They don't trust you to know what they're going to do with this technology. So I and my community, we don't trust them.
Rocco, followed by Kiana and Bill.
I'm coming up here blind. And, yeah, I've been surveilled for about 13 years and going. That shit's annoying. Like physically by off to do law enforcement. And having these cameras up is no better than being watched physically. It's invading privacy. We, the American people, won't stand for this shit. We won't stand for it. Yeah, no, not smart. Anyhow, yeah, man, I've been surveilled and having that up is no better than being watched physically. You know, you're gonna make me move to the mountains. Yeah, go to the mountains. Cause it won't follow me. But anyhow, yeah, this is not worth it, man. You're invading privacy, dude. We're American. We don't stand for this. As far as STPD and Sheriff Department, I don't trust you guys a fucking bit at all. You got 6 seconds. Anyhow, yeah. All right, bye.
Kiana Price, followed by Bill Lee, followed by Tama.
Hello. Our community is more looked down upon the police than uplifted and aided. Streetlight cameras are not put to solve crimes or make the community safer. They are there to enable the police department to find easier pointing targets to prey on and badgers. The police department does not show integrity when it comes to using body cam footage. They shut it off and filter things out when they want to. So how can we trust them to be doing the right thing with new technology? There are many alternative and safer resources that can be useful within our community. So we should really be mindful of wanting to allow this misuse. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill, and since we're a Navy town, I would like to start with a story about the Navy. So during World War II, the Navy wanted to find out ways to protect our planes, so they collected data of the bullet holes on the planes. And because of that, they decided to put armor on the body and the wings of the planes. But then a statistician working for the Navy called Abraham Ward told the Navy that the reason you see these bullet holes is that these planes lived to tell the tale. And in fact, the problem is that there are planes that were hit in other places that did not live to come back and tell you that they got hit. So with that advice, the Navy started to put armor on the engines, on the cockpits, on the places that are truly vulnerable to the planes. All I want to say is that if all these opposition fails, and the city council decides to go with option 1, then I think we should put these surveillance cameras on places where there are no crimes reported, like gated communities and private beaches and country clubs. All right.
Tama, followed by Keyshawn, followed by Hidayah.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Tama Becker-Verano, and I'm speaking on behalf of Change Begins With Me, a Trust Coalition partner, and I live in District 6. History reminds us that actions, particularly those pushed using fear and misinformation taken in the name of public safety, can ultimately result in gross overreach and cause disproportionate harm to communities of color and other vulnerable populations. No expectation of privacy in public spaces is not equivalent to permission to be surveilled wherever we go. SDPD says they need this technology. They also needed to militarize police departments with weapons of war before AB 481, AB 48, and SB 978. They needed the chokehold before George Floyd and AB 1196. And they needed to block access to police misconduct until SB 2. They do not need this technology. And I'd like to point out, when I entered this building tonight, the officer was having a conversation with the city staffer, and my bag went through the X-ray machine completely not looked at all. People who look like me get
Thank
a
you.
pass like this often.
Thank you. Keyshawn Price, followed by Hadaya, followed by E-Class, followed by Saba.
Hello, I have 1 minute, so let me be quick and honest. The police was first created to control and police the slaves with brutal force. Now that we are in the 21st century, they are asking the public to pay out their pockets for hyper surveillance targeted at Black, brown, and poor communities. Cameras looking into houses and the potential for a specific protected class to be harassed by officers because they're biases. For example, in 1997, a top-ranking police official in Washington, D.C. was caught using police databases to gather information on patrons of a gay club. By looking up the license plate numbers of cars parked at the club and researching the backgrounds of the vehicle owners, he tried to blackmail patrons who were married. Imagine what someone like that could do with the citywide spike camera system. So imagine officers with this power.
Hello, can you hear me? So for Hadaya and Aklas is a group of youth that want to speak together, so they're seating time as a group. I think they already did the time cards. So if you want to look through that. Our first speaker will be Mohammed.
Can I start?
Just to clarify, it's four speakers for this, right?
3.
Oh, I see. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mohammed Benge. I'm a resident of District 9 and a member of PAN and Youth Congress. I am here today along with my fellow youth members to share my thoughts on surveillance technology and why I think the Privacy Advisory Board should move to not expanding smart streetlights. Because if the goal is to increase public safety and stop crime from happening, why spend millions of dollars on a device that will just act as another bystander that's on a cell phone that's recording? We've seen this already. A camera without the ability to feel or understand, how can we trust that these cameras can truly give us a perspective of looking at crime? How can we trust that, that those who are given the responsibility of watching these crimes, that they will truly understand what is going on? Perspective lies within the eyes of the beholder. So I would like to bring the bigger question to the topic, who is watching who? I think it is important to understand that our lives aren't the writings of an author who is obsessed with the dystopian genre, nor is this some big, large conspiracy theory. This is real life. Ask yourselves, would it be okay if your parents were to document your every move? It wouldn't, right? You'd end up lacking the ability to garner your own independence. So what makes it okay for governments to have this sort of power? Our ability to think and operate freely is what makes us human. When cameras watch us 24/7, it forces us to put on an act. We slowly lose our humanity and we become more like puppets in a show. When we use cameras as a means to watch and quote unquote prevent crime, we do nothing more than cause people to fear. But we shouldn't fear our police officers. We should instead feel nothing but positive emotions towards them. But instead, people like myself will have to worry about if we are making the wrong moves or gestures, if we accidentally sped off a parking lot, or if we looked suspicious on the wrong day. My mother worries about me going outside because she believes that my dark skin has left nothing, a metaphorical mark on my body. And she believes that every time I step outside the house, there's a chance of me being profiled by police. And this fear has led me to believe that I'm always being hunted as if I am some sort of prey. My mother came here for a better life, and she doesn't even feel like I will have the opportunity to get my own American dream just because of the color of my skin. With smart streetlights, I can only imagine how worse she will feel. But this doesn't have to be the norm. She doesn't have to feel worried about me every time I step outside the house. But that's up to you, not us. I urge the Privacy Advisory Board to not recommend and reject the proposal from SDPD. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sumaya Abdullahi, and I'm a member of the PAN and Youth Congress and a resident of District 9. I'm here today to express my thoughts on the new surveillance technology that is going to be implemented and how it will affect my community. If this technology is put in my community, it would further enforce surveilling and targeting people of color for no reason. The goal for this technology is to enforce more safety, but I feel it will do the complete opposite by targeting innocent people. My community is already targeted and watched enough, and this will make it worse. And I want to tie this into a story my mom told me from her past when she first moved to the US. My parents came to the US in 1990 and lived in a small apartment in City Heights near Fairmont Avenue. Their neighbors were white and would always make rude remarks towards them and think that they were dangerous. And around the same time of the 9/11 attacks and the US and Afghanistan war, the neighbors wrote on my parents' door, "Leave or we will kill you." My mom said she was terrified and called the police, but they did nothing. My parents came here for a better life, but they were watched and stereotyped. And another example of my people being surveilled was something recent. About 2 months ago, my little brother was out with his friends at the neighborhood cafe on University Avenue, right next to our PANA office. And someone said they saw him and his friends with a gun when it was a water gun they were playing with. The police was called on them and they were detained for nothing. The police and the people around me were profiling young Black boys. If we're already surveilled by people, imagine with new cameras. And I urge you to reject the proposal for new cameras for our safety. Thank you.
We have Mohammed, who has time ceded from Yazra, Masood, and Yurin.
Hi, my name is Ikhlas. I am a PANA Youth Congress and a resident District 9. We're here today as youth to say we don't want these technologies in our neighborhoods. We came together and started a counter surveillance fellowship. Our art pieces represent our voices against imposed surveillance technology in our communities. These shiny pieces represent us trying to protect our rightful privacy. The big banner is asking the question, who's watching who? We urge the Privacy Advisor Board to reject this proposal. Thank you. And now our chant. Who watches who? Every step we take, every move we make, we don't want to be watched or surveilled. Put the cameras away. Who watches who? Who watches who?
Not what we want to be watched or analyzed. Reject this now. Put the cameras away.
Who watches who? Thank you.
I just want to clarify if Sumaya is that part of that group as well? We have 2 people seated time to Sumaya. Okay, all set. All right. Next up, we have Kate Metcalf, followed by Amira, followed by Cherry.
That's a tough act to follow. Hi, my name is Kate Metcalf. So as a San Diegan, I have been carefully following how the public deliberation process was conducted and what the public has had to say about the deployment of this technology. In my opinion, as a social scientist, this process has been rigorous given the constraints, and I thank the board for their efforts. I think that everyone agrees here that public deliberation is critical. And as we all know, we live in an incredibly diverse city. And so I think it was reasonable to assume that there would be a diversity of experience and opinions raised through this process that public opinion needed to engage. But as you all know, and as folks here can find in Appendix 2 on the no draft, there was remarkable community consensus in what the right decision is regarding this technology. 88% of public comments given to the board asked you to reject the use of this technology. I want to put that number in context. Mayor Todd Gloria only received 56% of the vote. Our most popular city council people received only 63% of their districts. 88% of the community has asked you not to put this technology forward, and I hope you won't.
Amira, followed by Cherry, followed by Melissa Hernandez.
Good evening. My name is Humaira Yusufi, Interim Executive Director at PANA. I want to thank you all for the last couple of months. As the Privacy Advisory Board, you all have been very intentional in listening to the community. We as the community have come time and time again to tell you all why we're concerned about the smart street light cameras and the ALPR, how it impacts our communities, what the previous harm has been. You just heard our youth right now who are right here, they're San Diego residents who grew up here talking to you about the harm they've experienced. And as you all are deliberating this, I want you all to think about their experiences, about our experiences. I want to thank the folks in the community that actually drafted why you all should not propose, you all should not recommend these technologies to city council. It was very well written, and you all actually already did, the due diligence of raising all of the issues and what is missing and why this is not good technology. So I hope you all vote against
Thank you.
it.
Hello, my name is Sheree Hampton. I'm the founder of It's a Vibe nonprofit, and I'm also a violence interrupter in districts 4 and 8. And so basically, let me just give you the definition of surveillance. That is close observation, especially of a suspected spy or criminal. So what does doing surveillance mean? The careful watching of a person or place, especially by the police or army, because of a crime that has happened or is expected. What are you guys waiting for us to do? We're not in the penitentiary. So that's automatically taking our 4th and 14th Amendments away. For those who don't know it, the 14th Amendment is the right to privacy, is implied by the guarantee of due process for all individuals, meaning that the state cannot exert undue control over citizens' private lives. 4th Amendment is the U.S. Constitution, which protects privacy by governing how police may surveil people's effects, including their electronic data. Again, we're not in the penitentiary doing maximum time, respect our privacy and our mental health.
Time,
Thank
please.
you.
Thank you. Melissa, followed by Michelle Woodson, Nancy Rutherford.
Hello, my name is Melissa Hernandez. I am a community activist. I am a African American Cuban woman, and I am also a human. I'm gonna keep it real nice, short, and simple. Thank you all for being here tonight. I don't need to repeat anything that you've already heard. But I do want to say to those of you who are against, that are saying that us who are against or opposed to the vote or whatnot, that we are aiding and abetting. Try looking like me, try having hair like me, try living in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, try even growing up in rough areas and being discriminated by the San Diego Police Department or any police department. And then you can understand why we're opposing to this streetlight camera. I ask you today to really think about your vote and make the right decision. And yeah, if you want them in your area, like old boy with them glasses said, put them in the areas that, you feel you're in danger in. Peace.
Michelle Woodson, followed by Nancy Rutherford. Natalie.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Woodson, and I'm the executive director of a local homeless advocacy agency and a criminal defense attorney. You've heard from many concerned community members tonight about the use of smart streetlight technologies and the impacts of ALPR in our communities. There are many concerns about the use of this technology, which include concerns of SDPD's history of racial bias and discrimination, the discriminatory use of technology, the disproportionate impacts on Black and Brown communities, the disturbing collection and use of our data, and the inefficacies and use of this kind of technology, and the potential legal implications. As a criminal defense attorney, I'm quite concerned with the way in which the use of this technology will infringe on our community members' constitutional rights. And as a homeless advocate, I'm extremely concerned with how mass surveillance, even in public spaces, impacts people's experiencing homelessness rights to privacy. For them, whatever shelter they are able to construct is their home, and the right to privacy should adhere to that home, the same as it would for any regularly housed person.
Thank you.
I urge you to consider the harms that this technology will have on our community and reject the proposal. Thank you.
Hello again, I'm Nancy Rutherford. I'm a resident of District 3, and I'm speaking now on behalf of myself. So much. The proposal is so incomplete that the conspiracy theorist in me thinks it was an attempt to jam the gears of the Privacy Advisory Board before you could even get started. I appreciate your diligence, and I appreciate option 2 and the thoroughness of your response. And I am in favor of option 2. Somewhere in the documentation, San Diego Police wrote that technology removes bias from policing. This should be a disqualifying statement for anyone wanting to be responsible for surveillance in our community. Technology replicates and automates
human and institutional bias. Surveillance technology is a force multiplier and a bias multiplier. Surveillance does not keep us safe. It doesn't even really prevent crime. It's investigation.
Thank you very much.
Time.
Thank you.
Am I done?
Yes.
Darn, I have so much. Thank you.
We just have a few more comments as well as a few in the queue. Natalie, followed by Alice, followed by Cheryl.
So in the previous public advisory board meeting, the San Diego Policeman Department keeps giving us all these assurances that the technology will be used just for investigating violent crimes, that the technology will not be using facial recognition. But given the history of what has happened so far, I don't trust any of these claims, and you shouldn't either. Like the Trust Coalition pointed out, in 2018, SCPD shared license plate location data with Customs and Border Patrol. In 2020, during the Black Lives Matter movement, they used smart streetlight footage to investigate nonviolent crimes such as property damage. I don't want to have to fight the battle to stop facial recognition and unwarranted arrests of marginalized people after the streetlights have already been installed. I would rather the advisory board vote to cut this off at the root. I live in District 3 in downtown San Diego, and I would rather the city spend these $4 million to help the people who are living in tents outside of my building. I urge you not to spend this money on the technology that has historically been used to criminalize Black and brown people for standing up for their rights or just for existing in this country. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Ellis, Cheryl, and then our last speaker will be Sullen.
Minute is too short. You guys gotta switch that up. It's a shame you got people rushing, makes everybody seem nervous. The city has created a data intermediary in which they sell data, collect data, whatever. I think that's a big issue. Oh yeah, and I'm in opposition to this for obvious privacy reasons, but I'm more concerned with what the city is doing with this data, because that's a lot of money. I worked in data collection. I'm an inspector, and I do a lot more data collecting than inspecting nowadays because it's a big business. It's about to be what, like $300 billion industry or something like that. And that's just people who work actively in data. So the city is either one, giving this data away for free, which is dumb, or two, the city is making money with this data, and that money should probably be reinvested into the communities that it's getting the data from. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Canson, founder of Treat Me, Don't Mistreat Me, and co-founder of Moms Against Torture. Allowing these streetlights will follow suit on violating the privacy rights of Black and brown people and continue the narrative that Black and brown people are not law-abiding and continue to criminalize Black and brown people and Indigenous people. Please disallow this proposal. Cameras have been discontinued to convict people of traffic violations because of so many defects and false convictions. And the same thing can happen with smart streetlights. There are much better and important ways to spend this money. We have been traumatized for far too long, and this will just further traumatize us. The government continues to deceitfully impose their agenda of mass incarceration, and we aren't clear nor informed of the true reasons for these street cameras. Please oppose the street cameras in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Last speaker, I think it's Salem. Salem.
Hi, I'm Salem. I don't have much more to say that hasn't already been said. All I can say is I think this is a lot about trust. The whole group was, the reason y'all exist is because of a group called the Trust Coalition. And I think the message is clear from everybody here. San Diego Police Department, we do not trust you. That's
Moving to online comment. There are 12 folks in the queue with their hands raised. First hand is Layla Aziz.
this data, and I really like the presentation that the woman gave, and I support option 2. And I mean, the facts that were presented and the opposing argument, it just seems that if there's no understanding there must be other politics or any other things at play. My first encounter with the police, and I don't have a criminal record. I don't do crime. I live an upstanding life. And as a kid, I was put on the ground with shotguns facing me because I was a Black girl in an area they didn't want me in. When I first started doing police accountability work, the first thing they did was they attempted to scare me, and they were in my yard at 3 o'clock in the morning claiming that there were reports of shots. And then they asked me if they could, trying to get in my yard. I stopped them. Then they asked, can they breach my property to look in the neighbor's yard? And you could tell by the laughs on their faces, they were shocked that I found them outside that early. And I think they were trying to scare me. I think I'm afraid, and I don't think they should have this kind of equipment.
That concludes your time. Thank you. We still have 10 speakers in the queue. I'm sorry, 11. Our next speaker is Eric Anderson.
Good evening, members. I'm Eric Anderson, District 9. Are you serious that the police will get the last word after the time for public comment rebuttals is over today? That's not fair, to say the least, and I'm pretty sure it's not the first time that this has happened. Thank you for displaying the visual aids in item 5 today. Public transparency is important. My previous suggestion was made in haste, but I still think you should make the Trust Coalition slides available to the public somehow, perhaps in a link and an apology under the video of this meeting if and when you post it on sandiego.gov. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving to our next speaker, Genevieve Jones-Wright.
I want to empower you as the experts, as my colleagues in the work, Seth and Homira, did in their comments. You've heard from impacted community members and those who will continue to be impacted if this technology is approved. I can tell you've done your due diligence in vetting the technology before you tonight. You've noted significant defects, both procedurally and substantively, that should give you pause. And honestly, no rebuttal offered by SDPD with the full weight of the government behind them should overcome them. You are not here to be a rubber stamp for SDPD or other city personnel. Please remember the City Council needs you to advise them as experts in your respective fields and as the persons who were written into the process to assess, vet, evaluate, and advise. Trust SD was formed because SDPD lied to our City Council about the functions and capabilities of these so-called smart streetlights in the first place. Please consider SDPD's credibility, lack of transparency, and trustworthiness when making this decision. Not to mention, they've never seen a tool they can use against marginalized communities to oppress them even more.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Trust SD, not SDPD.
We still have some folks in the queue. Our next caller is ending in 8731.
All right, it's true. First, everybody who's got a problem with this privacy violation, go to the next San Diego City Council meeting on June 26th and speak. Second, ordinances aren't law. Third, anyone supporting this spy tech is aiding criminals who are violating the 4th and 14th Amendments. Now here's info from the SDPD Surveillance Impact Report. Quote, smart streetlights with license plate recognition are recorded 24 hours, searchable by vehicle type, make, model, unique features, color, time frame, plate details, and state detection. Locations selected were violent crime locations, end quote. Underserved communities are the target, and they're spying on people from other states too. It's admitted that the information taken from the smart streetlights is used only after a crime has taken place, so it will not prevent crime. The report also says that the smart streetlight technology is entirely web-based and Amazon Web Services government cloud. Amazon is a partner of the World Economic Forum, who wants to control the world's data and privacy by 2030. It's an open-air prison. That's what they're
Your
trying
time
to
is up.
create.
Moving to our next speaker, Alliance San Diego.
Erin Sermotagrassi, Policy Director at Alliance San Diego. We are a member of the Trust SD Coalition. I'm calling in opposition to the smart streetlight and ALPR technology and respectfully ask the Privacy Advisory Board to choose option 2. I've spent the last 4 years tracking SB 54 implementation in the region. SB 54 prohibits the sharing of information with federal immigration agencies. As iNewsSource reported, SDPD violated SB 54 in 2019 when a police officer handed an individual over to ICE. The officer was never disciplined. While SDPD tells you they will not share any of this data with federal immigration, their past actions give me very little confidence that they will actually comply with SB 54. Further, technology does not remove bias in policing. And I want to make clear that this is not one of the recommendations of the Racial Identity Profiling Board, RIPA. RIPA actually recommends stopping pretext stops and suspicionless searches, but SDPD has been opposed to that. Communities of color have been surveilled for decades. I am fourth-generation Japanese American, and I know this to be true based on the treatment of my own family.
Thank
It is
you,
time for this to
Scott.
stop.
Thank you. Moving to our next speaker, Ilka.
Yes, I want to really echo the fact that all of you sitting on the board are either an aunt, an uncle, a parent. And if you didn't get affected by the speakers or young adults from PANA, then you have no heart and you have no feeling. And what even more disgusted me is when we had two women in the previous time speak in the essence of hate crime against our BIPOC neighbors and brothers and sisters, and even mentioned a machine gun. You did not shut them off. It says Privacy Advisory Board. It doesn't say allow hate crimes. And it is disgusting that you allowed that in the previous session. And I want to echo again the young adults who spoke. Picture them as your children. Those cameras will not know the difference between somebody in a blue hoodie and someone else in a
Your
blue
time
hoodie.
is up. We still have speakers in the queue. Our next speaker is the original.
Yeah, you guys absolutely and unequivocally should vote for and push option number 2, because the lack of transparency and inability of the city council to follow their own procedures. This is abhorrent, and you guys need to do what is in the best interest of the community. And as you have seen, the number of people who have come forward in opposition is, there has been nobody so far, and I'm not sure who's going to be calling after me, but nobody has said that they are in for this. And not only do people of color get abused by the police, but I was abused by the police. It was on video. The man was exonerated. He's a sheriff deputy at the San Diego Board of Supervisors, and nothing has happened. So the fact that you guys think that you're going to stop crime when you are the ones engaging in it is very, very negligent. And you guys have all taken an oath, and you need to uphold it. And this is very dangerous, the route that you're
Thank you. going. Your So you time is need up. to We still have
stop.
speakers in the queue. Thank you. Our next speaker is Jean Wee.
Hi, my name is John Wee. I'm a community advocate here in San Diego. I don't want to echo everything that other folks already said, but I was listening to city staff presentation and want to point out something. The city staff and the city are on paid time to do this thing. The rest of us are volunteers to do this work, and we showed up, and it's important to us. But the whole point was that in 2016, when the city rolled out this, smart street light, without any community even know about it, and it came around the trust that they came together and do this work. We have always talked about responsible government, and what the city shown to us this time around is not responsible at all. The police department rolled out the town hall with at least 8 cops standing in the back of the room, utilizing overtime money to do the thing and trying to ram the thing through. The mayor already pushing out $4 million to support the program without actually going through the proper procedure. So I would say if you're going to do something with the, you have to do it.
Our next speaker is Larry Webb.
Hi, I'm Larry Webb, Mission Beach Town Council President, founding member of the Coastal Coalition. I want to thank you all for being volunteers. The Mission Beach Town Council voted to support the use of this technology. There have been many ifs brought up about the use of this technology, and I don't believe this or any board can find an answer to all of them. The STPD has defined the usage of this technology as being an investigative tool and explained the strict procedures necessary for anyone to access the information created so that information is not misused. The board should trust the leadership of the STPD on its stated usage and safeguards, but that trust should not be blind. The real job of this board should be to continue to verify that the trust put into the leadership of the STPD continues to be earned as the technology is actually put into use. Please recommend to the City Council that technology be deployed. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to our next speaker, Satori.
Hello, my name is Satori Jeldon. I live in District 2 and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I greatly appreciate the countless voices we've already heard from today. I'm speaking to the board today to echo these concerns brought up by members of the community and to emphasize again that the smart streetlights and ALPR are absolutely not worth the financial costs estimated at $4 million when the city is amidst a poverty crisis. Additionally, this technology is also not worth the cost of over surveillance and consequential police brutality upon the citizens of the city of San Diego. I implore the board to consider the plethora of potential negative effects that this would have on the citizens of San Diego before allowing this technology to be reinstated. I believe the proposed millions of dollars spent to revitalize these cameras could be better spent in crucial areas where San Diegans need support, like the addition of affordable housing, increased resources for houseless individuals, or even work on our roads, rather than spending this money on technology that has been shown to be massively ineffective. This expensive technology is dangerous for our community and entirely unnecessary for the city of San Diego. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you considering the needs of the community.
Moving to the next speaker, Asma. Our next speaker with their hand raised is Asma Abdi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please make your comments.
Hello, my name is Asma Abdi. I'm a policy associate with PANA, Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans, and we're a member of the Trust SD Coalition. I'm calling in opposition of the use of these spy cameras and license plate readers. I asked the board to require the department to increase written policy protections for San Diegans. These surveillance cameras can contribute to the nationwide crisis of attacking the rights of women, Muslims, pregnant people, and LGBTQ communities. The department's proposed policies are silent on how the department would prevent use of the spy cameras by outside agencies to track and harm residents and visitors of San Diego. I also asked the board to confirm that the department's ALPR policies are compliant with the spirit and letter of the laws in California, and that place restrictions on how this ALPR can be used. Governments have realized the uncontrolled use of ALPR is harmful, and several laws have been passed in California regulating the use of ALPR. Part of the Privacy Board's mandate is to review proposals for how each proposal aligns to local, state, and national trends and regulation. Thank you.
We have two more speakers in the queue. Our next speaker is Maya Little Sonia.
I urge the board to vote for option 2. So I echo the sentiment expressed by Seth Hall and others. Use your expertise and consider whether this is the proposal you want to endorse with all of the community pushback, the opaque and evasive manner in which the police have presented and defended their proposal. There's just too many risks, too many unknowns, too much at stake. And I hope you will take all of this into consideration in conjunction with your expertise and experience to reject this proposal. And I also want to urge everyone listening to contact their city council members and let them know you oppose mass surveillance, because ultimately it is their vote that will make this happen or not, regardless of how the board moves forward today. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Catherine Douglas.
I totally support smart streetlights. Anybody who doesn't must have something that they are ashamed of. It's not about chasing people who are doing the right thing. Vote yes on smart streetlights. And if any communities decide as a whole that they don't want them, I will take them all in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment.
We'll go ahead and move to board comments and questions. In the interest of time, we'll I encourage board members to keep targeted questions targeted. We'll not do a continuous back and forth. Do 2 minutes per comment. So I have
In our point of order, when you say questions aren't back and forth and targeted, can you explain that a little bit more? I don't totally understand it.
tried not to have a very extended initial to time. If there's any way to kind of condense them into the same line of questioning is all. I just have two, one's very quick and just want to make sure we get this in the record. This is the first of many technologies. The board kind of had to hear kind of via hearsay of potential technologies down the pipeline. Does the police department have you formally presented the citywide inventory list to the PAB? If not, when is the intention to do that so that we can do the ranking for prioritization?
Well, as you know, we have to undertake if I can make an opening comment, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Lieutenant Charles Lara. I work with the San Diego Police Department, obviously. With me is Lieutenant Eric Portnoy. We both work in the Special Projects Legislative Affairs. With me is Steve Chen. He's the Deputy Director of Data Systems for the San Diego Police Department. He's my technical guy. And then I also have Brendan Daly, who's the City Cybersecurity Manager from the city side. With regard to your question, I just want to make some opening comments. Like I said, I wanted to begin by thanking the Privacy Advisory Board for their work, their time, their passion, and their scholarship. This is a new process, and we are all learning our way through it. The board is working vigorously to defend the privacy rights of San Diegans, and that is an important charge. I also want to acknowledge the time and passion of all the people who came to express their opinion regarding this proposed program, either in person or on Zoom, whether they spoke in favor or against the technology. We have answered the board's 111 questions that were given us as quickly as possible, given staffing, making sure our answers were complete and accurate, and meeting our requirements to produce the other use policies, while simultaneously producing use policies for the anticipated 75 or so other technologies that we hope to present soon. It has been a very busy time in the unit, and we are working tirelessly to meet our mandates under the ordinance. The department has the responsibility to balance safety and the constitutional rights of San Diegans. The department respects the privacy, speech and assembly rights of San Diegans, while simultaneously seeking to protect the public and seeking justice for victims of crime. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and be heard tonight. With regard to the other list, we have the use policies up for what I'll refer to as the legacy technologies, the technologies that we've used before and ultimately require the board to present to the board and to ultimately to council. But we have to go through the process of giving, per the statute, doing a use policy, an impact report, presenting those to council after having done, the Privacy Advisory Board, after doing 9 community meetings per piece of technology, then to the Privacy Advisory Board, this body, then ultimately on to council. So to have that before you. We are working with all deliberate speed to make sure that is happening. But again, we are trying to undertake that process, and it's a busy one. And as soon as is humanly possible, of course.
Thank you, Acting Captain. Specifically for smart streetlights and ALPR, I made this question earlier after the trust presentation. It had to do with the potential for other ways to get to this point. Are there better ways to do this? There's 2 questions posed in the litany of questions that you guys were nice enough to answer for us. One of them being, is this really the best use of the time, of the money? And I think try to prove it with numbers, comparing the 4 million and how many officer hours that could provide, and compared that, I think under number 7, you compared that to the cameras, the recognition technology, and the hours that it provided. It just feels like a better, more clear, direct, incontrovertible way to prove that it's effective is to look at what was already used in the past, right? When the smart streetlights predecessor was shut down years ago, could you not have proven that crime shot up? And why was that not the first and foremost argument to prove that this would be very effective?
The, the effectiveness of a program like this one is, our alternative, because that was the question was asked, what alternatives were considered is we want to first consider the eyes and ears of police officers on the street, the folks that are out there every day, 24 hours a day, protecting San Diegans. And so the question was about the spending the money to meet this obligation, and what would be a better expenditure of funds. And so we obviously sought to compare what is the time spent in the work unit produced by a standard police officer at the amount of money that is potentially to be spent for smart streetlights. And so the time, for the 13 officers that the money would purchase is, in terms of work unit, that's, how this, we have ultimately like 4,380,000 hours of being able to observe as compared to the time that the 22,100 hours of observation time. And the two systems, the surveillance, the streetlights and officers, they both see essentially the same thing if they're out, out on patrol. These cameras look at public spaces and observe public spaces as a patrol officer would driving through any given community. And so we thought that was a very apt way to look at what value is in these cameras and at what cost.
I think the main point being, couldn't you have proven that the previous technology that was used in San Diegans but was shut off, couldn't you have proven that shutting that off directly led to an increase of crime if we're talking about just clear proof that this helps deter and help solve crimes?
Well, I could point to just the other day, I happened to facilitate as you know, the Generation 1 cameras, the smart streetlights are still up. And there was a shooting over the weekend in Liberty Station. And so the district attorney's office wrote a warrant for us to compel us to produce the 8 smart streetlights. I'll refer to them as the Generation 1 streetlights in support of an investigation of that homicide. And so for our part, obviously, we don't have access to that system anymore, but we are compelled to produce those lights. I don't think the district attorney's office is in the business of writing warrants and seeking warrants, and they have to have probable cause to do so, because there wouldn't be evidence of that shooting or that homicide on those cameras. So although those cameras are not viewed by the police, they're still up and recording on a 5-day loop. And the fact that the district attorney's office is seeking a warrant and obtained probable cause to obtain that warrant in support of prosecuting and finding justice for a victim of a crime over the weekend at Liberty Station shows that these cameras are effective and produce incontrovertible evidence.
Sorry, did I hear correctly? You said that the old generation is still up and recording still
Yes.
on a 5-day, okay. Thank you. When do you intend to go to council with this?
Well, I believe the July or the 19th is the soonest we could go to council with this.
Okay.
Pardon me. Forgive me. And we have to follow the protocol to go to Public Safety Subcommittee first, and then it would be on to council.
The subcommittee would be July.
I believe the 19th.
Okay. And what is your sort of target date for installing these? And what should go live?
I hate to provide a lawyerly answer, but it depends. The council has to approve this technology, and obviously based upon your input, the community's input, to being taken into account, your expertise and our perspective and the community's perspective. I don't know that I think council goes dark in the month of August, and so we are, let's just say we move forward to public safety July 19th. It might be a little tight to get to full council before August. So September, let's just say hypothetically, there's an approval date in September, then perhaps August. And that's, of course, dependent upon approval.
Thank you. So that's a pretty quick timeline. So then my questions are, if you're able, if you were to have this approved tomorrow and you could go live in a month, let's say. And we still don't know who the ALPR vendor is? I apologize. I'm
No,
not
you-
trying to
you-
be
you-
funny.
no, no,
So-
I don't take it, I don't take any of this personally. The section 210.0103, the statute itself, the surveillance ordinance reads, A, city staff shall obtain city council approval prior to any of the following, and 2 and 4 are, to my mind, are the most operative sections before acquiring new surveillance technology, including but not limited to procuring such technology without the exchange of consideration, and 4, entering into a continuing agreement or other written agreement to acquire, share, or otherwise use surveillance technology. So under the ordinance as written, we must produce a use policy, conduct non-community meetings, which have been done, provide impact report with that community feedback, before we are permitted to acquire or into an agreement. And without city council approval of the concept of smart streetlights, there can be no contract. So, we are not in a contract with anyone right now.
There's negotiations though, right?
Pardon me?
Are there negotiations?
Well, Ubicquia is an interesting entity in that the discussions with Ubicquia about this program predated the existence of the Privacy Advisory Board and the surveillance ordinance. The other situation is in some instances, if we say we wanted a widget that produced X, Y, and Z result of technology and the things that we wanted fell under the surveillance ordinance, we would have to go out to a request for proposal. And we wouldn't perhaps even know who the vendors are in the space of widgets that provide X, Y, and Z. So the issue for us is that the ordinance is written, does not necessarily afford us the ability to, before we have to have a council approval to have a contract at all. And if council says that we're not to have a contract, then we won't.
Okay. No, I understand. There are some confusing parts to the ordinance. So let me ask a different way. Does Ubicquia already have partnerships with ALPR vendors? Do they already have integrations with particular ALPR vendors? And do you know who those are?
We don't have a contract with anyone, and there are
With
ongoing.
Ubicquia?
Again, we don't have a contract with anyone. And so it would be premature for me to comment on, whether or not they have, whatever partnerships they have.
Okay, thank you. That's all of that's very helpful. Questions about third-party dependencies. I noticed that only AWS was listed, but then another part of your answers had said that wireless connectivity, installation and maintenance, all of those are also other third parties. Is that right?
They would be, I imagine if approved, they would be subsumed by Ubicquia. That they would have that built into their proposal.
Okay. Another part, sorry, and then I'll hand it over to other people. In order to train your officers how to use this, again, at that point in time, we'd also need to know which technology we're training someone on. What do you propose to train your officers with if we don't know who they are and if we're going to go live by September?
And once I have a contract, I'll be able to tailor my training to the technology that is approved. And so for our part, we have to have a technology and a contract and a technology, and then we develop there are already a number, and we've submitted, those laws that are already pertain to security, safety, to all the various privacy, the FACE Act, SB 54, all of those things have to apply as well, along with the need to know, right to know, the level of training, the level of access. We would train people on, hey, you're already, anytime you log into a city system, you know that you are being monitored, that you are using these, and you can be disciplined for using these systems improperly. So upon having a vendor, and upon having a technology, I can create the training. I was a training lieutenant with the San Diego Police Department. We can deploy, we've had to train on any number of things, utilization of body-worn cameras, how we collect RIPA data, search and seizure, all those things. We know how to train people and can do so in short order when we have a technology.
Thank you.
I think one of the repeated issues in the rejection proposal draft is it doesn't comport with the ordinance. And so I think one of the issues that was just mentioned now is three-party data sharing. Ordinance requires the police report whether and how information collected from smart streetlights can be used or accessed, including any required justification or legal standard necessary to do so. And if a lot of this is still dependent on who Ubicquia contracts with, how can you in full confidence say that we're in compliance with the ordinance if there's still some in the air? That makes sense.
It does. And again, I've for my part, the drafting, and for the department's part, the drafting of the surveillance ordinance makes it difficult for all these things to be vetted out. Perhaps, the authors of the ordinance didn't understand city processes. Again, not to disparage anyone, but with the whole point, the surveillance ordinance itself makes it difficult to comply with the asks. I mean, in terms of, were you talking about acquisition of data as well? And for the record, we didn't write the ordinance, but it's our duty to comply with it. In terms of acquisition, obviously there's a difference of opinion with regard to the expectation of privacy in public places. It is our position that there is no expectation of privacy in public places, and so we don't think on a standard that is reasonable suspicion, probable cause. For the acquisition of the things that happen in public spaces. So there's no standard to apply in the absence of a search.
Yeah, so I have two questions. I'd like to follow up on this theme. In the proposal, it says several times that there is no expectation to privacy. And I was wondering if you could clarify that, why that's the department's position. I have another question, but I'll wait for you to answer that first.
Because it's the law. I'm an instructor of search and seizure. I've been a police officer for nearly 24 years. For example, let's say I'm walking out on the street and I have narcotics in my hand. If a police officer were to walk by and see the narcotic in my hand, no search has taken place under the Fourth Amendment, because that narcotic or that contraband is not in a place where an expectation of privacy exists, like a pocket, like a backpack. And those are places where reasonable expectations of privacy exist. And so those places where the inside of my body, the inside of my pocket, the inside of a backpack, those are classically places where the reasonable expectations of privacy that this court speak, that society is prepared to recognize exist. And so the equivalent of walking around, so if I'm driving a vehicle and it's got a stolen license plate and it's a stolen vehicle, and I drive that in a public place, it is the equivalent of me walking around with narcotics in my hand. It is viewable by any police officer, and as such, that is merely an observation. It is not a search under the Fourth Amendment.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
The second question I have, the proposal states that the technology will only be used for felony investigative purposes. That's the language that appears throughout the proposal. And so I'm just wondering what the implications are for the First Amendment, for example. So let me give you two scenarios, and I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are. We recently went through the protests after George Floyd. There was a lot of protests here. And in some instances, protests can either be, individuals may face misdemeanor or felony charges. So scenario one, could you envision this technology being used for people protesting in a scenario that, the kind of scenario that we would think of after George Floyd? And then also a second scenario, just to get some clarity, it was recently discovered that numerous agencies in the state of California were using the VLRs to track people who were coming to California for abortions. And again, I was looking at some of the laws in Texas, for example, that's considered a felony as well. So I guess what I'm asking is, since those could be potentially felonies, could this technology be used for people exercising their First Amendment right? And is it possible that it could be used for individuals coming to the state of California for abortion, since technically those are felonies?
So there's a lot of questions there. So let me just begin with the First Amendment right. The police departments are in the business of understanding how to balance rights. Say, for example, we have our body-worn cameras. The body worn cameras are in a buffering, non-recording mode most of the time until we're going to take enforcement action. Then we double tap the body worn camera to activate it so that it is actually recording. During civil unrest, and I was out I was a sitting internal affairs lieutenant, but I was out on the streets, and there were violence, there were crimes taking place, and I was out as we were physically arresting people. People were throwing hammers at us, frozen bottles of liquid. Our cars were vandalized, but numerous crimes, officers being struck by bottles, felony vandalism of police cars, arson, rioting, looting, assaults with deadly weapons to include bottles and Molotov cocktails, auto theft, which became an arson of that vehicle, looting, burglary, robbery, lasering of police helicopters. So for our part, the First Amendment obviously protects peaceable assembly and to redress grievances. It also, to the right to express yourself freely, but we also have to understand that actions can go from being lawful, free speech to violent and illegal activity. And say after an unlawful assembly is declared. So crimes do take place, and the cameras were used to part of the investigation of those crimes. With regard to moving on, so does that?
Yes.
Moving on to then the next issue of access to say abortion care. The FACE Act in California, prohibits us from curtailing the rights of people to seek medical care and reproductive care, of which abortion. I'm not here to be pro or against, but that is a protected right in California. We are not interested in stymieing people's ability to lawfully seek health care and reproductive care in the state of California. It's also against the law. So we are not going to prosecute people for seeking reproductive health care.
Yeah. So anything else you want to say about those questions?
Was there another aspect?
No, that was it. So the final question is related to this, just for more clarity. You've made it clear that from your perspective, from the department's perspective, there is no reasonable right to privacy. I heard you say earlier that the standard of law is not probable cause. It's not reasonable suspicion. That's something that's even used for stop and frisk. You have to be able to articulate why you're stopping someone, but none of that is you say is applicable here. What I do find to be the criteria, and maybe you can clarify this is my final question. In the proposal, it says the technology will be used for, quote, investigative purposes. So it's not reasonable suspicion. It's not probable cause. It's this other criteria, investigative purposes. So I was wondering if you could clarify what that means. That seems pretty broad. Maybe you can clarify what that refers to.
It would be my pleasure. So we're kind of at two different thresholds. The acquisition of the data, the observation of the activities that occur in public places. I say, for example, I don't have to, if I'm driving down the street and I see criminal activity, I'm not made to shade my eyes from it. I am permitted to see what I can see where I have a lawful right to be in public spaces. And so the cameras, by analogy, are permitted to see what they are permitted to see in public places, unimpeded and without a legal standard having to be applied to that. When we do investigations, we look to very often when we prosecute crimes, we are looking for video evidence. There was a gentleman shot at the Central Library not too long ago. And there was a video of the perpetrator running away that was filmed by a coffee shop surveillance camera. Now, granted, the Fourth Amendment does not apply to private citizens. It protects you against the police. But when we're investigating a crime, we are looking to use those things that we acquire lawfully. That is, if there's a plate of a vehicle, or the observation of a perpetrator running in a street, or say for like the district attorney's office looking for the perpetrator of the homicide recently committed at Liberty Station. So we use whatever evidence is given us or we get by lawful means. We're not permitted to illegally get evidence against people. So the acquisition is standardless because it is a mere observation. The utilization and employment of that information is used in an investigation. Reasonable suspicion, the lower standard than probable cause, is the following. I have to have specific and articulable facts leading to me to believe that crime is afoot and the person that I am seeking to detain is connected with that crime. That's the standard for reasonable suspicion. For me, as you said, to stop a person, to detain a person, to temporarily inhibit their freedom under a free movement. Probable cause is a higher standard. It's the standard, obviously, for prosecution. It's the standard of being able to know that a crime has taken place or is about to take place. Those two standards aren't necessarily applicable or aren't applicable to the acquisition of things that exist in public spaces.
And so I guess what's not clear is, and you just thank you for clearly defining those legal standards. Probable cause is you have to have some clear evidence. Reasonable suspicion is you have to be able to articulate that there may be a crime. But with investigative purposes, it's just not clear to me what the criteria is. That seems like it seems like a lower standard. It seems like something is the lower standard would be mere suspicion. And so it just puzzles me that we're using this technology with a very low legal standard, and it's still not clear to me what that legal standard is when we say investigative purposes. Thank you.
Right. So we've been discussing police access to data, but we're dealing here with a complex computer system involving cameras and systems at the vendor and AWS. And that whole thing is prone to access by all kinds of individuals, subject to the quality of the security architecture. And I think it would be valuable to vet and study that architecture, but there isn't much information available about that. And I understand that it has much more to do with the vendor than you. But I do know that, for example, we have security researchers who are willing to do things like this. I'm wondering if you would be willing to facilitate or allow that some of these cameras would actually be made available to the researchers to take apart in their labs.
So again, that might be a little above my pay grade, but obviously we take, the board is charged with making recommendations to council. I mean, that is the charge of the PAB. And so I certainly see, you guys making a request, if it should this proposal move forward to vet and again, I'm a legal expert. I'm not much of a technology expert. So for our part to vet the architecture of the security system, the encryption, I said, if that proposal is put in writing, then we obviously will evaluate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here and answering the questions. And I don't know, is it just me or whether the air conditioning is off? But it's getting a little hot up in here. So it's not just me. Okay. Which is unfortunate because it makes it a little bit difficult both to ask questions and listen to questions. I don't know if there's anybody has control of the AC. No, it's a magical thing. It was worth a try. I want to go back and I don't want to put words in your mouth. So first, I heard you saying that when talking about when the streetlights are used and the interpretation that when we're in public, we don't actually have a right to privacy, kind of period. And then you gave an example that if somebody is walking down the street and they're smoking, they have, some drugs in their hands and a police officer sees that, then that's, enough information for them to actually engage with the person. But if somebody's walking down the street and has drugs inside of their pocket, that somehow was different and that somehow is regulated by their Fourth Amendment rights?
The short answer is yes. The things, because what I'm getting at is whatever I have out in my hand or out in plain view, as it were, in public, if an officer or a camera by extension sees that in plain view in a public place, then that's not a search under the law. There's no Fourth Amendment implication to that. The difference between in my pocket and in my hand, this is no expectation of privacy in public. The second those keys go into my pocket, that is now in a place where an expectation of privacy exists, that the Fourth Amendment and loads of court cases say that is a different enterprise. You have taken the time to put that into a place where a classic expectation of privacy that society is prepared to recognize exists. That's the difference.
Thank you. During the public comments and in my experience in the community and my experience formerly as a part of the Trust Coalition, we heard a lot of citizens who came forward and community members who came forward with their concerns that their Fourth Amendment rights had in fact been violated multiple times by the police. Because of that, one of the questions that there's 3 questions that the Privacy Advisory Board asked the San Diego Police Department to respond to. The first is, I'll read them together because of trying to be succinct, but how much has the city spent settling lawsuits related to police misconduct over the last 5 years, including legal cost settlements and awards? How many complaints have been filed against the city of San Diego for alleged Fourth Amendment violations? How many lawsuits have been filed against the city for alleged Fourth Amendment violations? How much has the city paid for Fourth Amendment violations? How many civil rights complaints have been filed based on Fourth Amendment violations over the last 5 years? What is the total cost of civil suits the city has paid based on Fourth Amendment violations? The response from the San Diego Police Department was essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, that's none of our business. I'm wondering, when you're here asking us to believe that you care about, not you personally, but the San Diego Police Department actually cares about our Fourth Amendment rights. But when we ask about the track record from the people who are asking us to trust them, the response is that's none of our business, and that doesn't fall within the purview of this ordinance. The last part that I'll add is, I'm not sure whether or not you've read the mission and the bylaws of the Privacy Advisory Board.
I've read the purpose and I forget the other thing was for the description and the purpose of the Privacy Advisory Board.
Okay, so, well, on one of them, I think they're kind of, I share your, there's a lot of things that are out there, but under the privacy of on the website, the Privacy Advisory Board, and there's bits and pieces of this that are in the bylaws as well. It says the Privacy Advisory Board shall, and the first point A is provide advice and technical assistance to the city on best practices to protect residents and visitor privacy rights in connection with the city's acquisition and use of surveillance technology. Don't you believe that questions around the police track record in protecting or violating Fourth Amendment rights would fall under what our job is as the Privacy Advisory Board?
First thing, I do care about the Fourth Amendment. The department cares about the Fourth Amendment, and very much so. However, what the cameras record in public places is not a Fourth Amendment violation. It's not even, it's an observation. And so your ask, this board's ask about what is the track record of the department with regard to civil suits, Fourth Amendment violations, payouts, all of those things, they would pertain to violations of the Fourth Amendment. And so the technology as it is posited only records in public places. And steps will be taken, with masking, and we can talk about that at another point. But if the technology to be employed has no implications other than observation in public places, then the nexus to the Fourth Amendment and violations of the Fourth Amendment is not there.
So I'm not sure. I don't think that you're answering the question. So I'll try to make it simpler. Would you agree that part of the role of the Privacy Advisory Board is to give our recommendation to the City Council based on what we think is best for the public?
Sure, yes.
And then do you not I'm trying to ask it in a way that's easier for you to answer. I'm not worried about your feelings. I just want to make it easier to answer. I care about your feelings, but that's not my point.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So then do you understand why it's concerning to us when we ask about the police's track record on Fourth Amendment violations, that the response is, that's none of your business?
Well, that's not what I wrote. And just so you understand and the board understands,
Can you maybe tell us what you wrote? I can also read it.
I'd be happy to read it as well. Would you like me to read it, or if you've?
Well, I'll read the part that I interpreted as it's none of our business. This question has no nexus to the Smart Streetlights program or technology and is decoupled from both the description and the purpose which shapes the Privacy Advisory Board. You don't see a connection between our concern about police recognizing Fourth Amendment rights of everyday people and why we would be actually asking a question around that?
I understand why the board would ask. I absolutely understand. But as an instructor of search and seizure, as a nearly 24-year police officer, and I can also look to the grand jury's report in recent history in 2020, which stated this technology had no Fourth Amendment, no privacy violation implications. To my mind,
Yeah, I don't think that's the question. Sorry to interrupt, because I know that there's a timing issue. A few follow-up questions, or did you want to ask some questions quickly? Okay, I'll ask one or two and then hand it over to you, Ike, if that's all right. Are you aware of some of the reports since 2016? I believe there's been at least 3 reports that track the bias in San Diego Police Department's pulling over African Americans in San Diego?
I am.
What assurances can you give us that if the San Diego Police Department has a track record of biased policing and pulling over African Americans more than other people, despite the fact that other people tended to be more guilty when they were pulled over, what kind of assurances can you then give to community members that are saying, hey, you're taking one more tool, a tool that most of us don't actually understand the powers of? Why wouldn't you continue to use these practices in a biased and discriminatory practice? And sorry, I know that's probably not the word you would use, but what are the assurances that you would give to us that these technologies will not be used in the same way that technologies like cars and all the other technologies that you have at your disposal now, as well as rules governing them, but that prevents you from actually not pulling over Black people more than everybody else?
Because we're sworn to uphold the Constitution and the laws. We are subject to discipline. We are subject to sanction, up to and including termination if we do the wrong thing. The Fourth Amendment is our touchstone in terms of depriving people of freedom. I am accountable because the federal government and the Constitution and the state Constitution make me accountable. I'm a former internal affairs lieutenant. I know that people get disciplined. I know that people get put out of the company behind violating policy and procedure. And so the assurances that I can give you are one of a former internal affairs lieutenant, one of a former internal affairs sergeant who investigated the San Diego police officers. So those are the assurances that I can give that we
essentially trust you. The last kind of follow-up, and then I have a lot of questions, but I understand we all have other things to do. Lost my track. The last follow-up question that I had was with Fourth Amendment rights. I'm gonna pass it on over to Ike. Yeah, and maybe it'll come back to me. I apologize.
I think Lee had a question.
I got it. I got it. Do you know whether or not, despite you're aware of these reports, do you know whether or not the San Diego Police Department has admitted to racial bias or racial profiling, period?
We have not.
And so even though we have reports that are saying it, even though that you've said that you've seen people who are actually have been disciplined based on it, the San Diego Police Department themselves continues to dismiss any concerns over, or to just say, not admit that there is actually any racial bias or racial profiling within the San Diego Police Department? And that's my last question.
I'm not saying that, that people don't do things that are contrary to a policy, procedure, and law. We recruit people, we recruit human beings, and human beings are fallible. Where people are found to have violated policy, procedure, or law, we take action against those people. And ultimately that can lead to up to and including being terminated from the organization or facing sanction for those things.
Have those actions in any way stopped the amount of racial profiling that's happening since 2016? or have the numbers continued to be roughly the same?
That I couldn't speak to right now.
I have a number of reports that
Well-
I'd be happy to send to you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you for that line of questioning. It's really important for the community here. I think Lee had one, and then I just had a follow-up about the ordinance.
Just in general, I think technology is coming, and it's coming whether we like it or not. It's going to be here, and I think we should utilize the tools to be better, effective, and efficient in our work. We can't have just pure gutting through with human nature. And I realize that San Diego Police Department, like all police enforcement, is really in a tough position. It's a difficult task. You're asked to do a lot of different things, and resources are limited. I feel understanding sympathy with regard to the amount of work that it takes to respond to questions and monitor these particular issues, but there are things that have to be done. And so there's a lot of great processes and principles out there that have already been established. For example, the Department of Homeland Security has a privacy office that has come up with guidelines for best practices. The Security Industry Association Data Privacy Code of Practice has really good policies, procedures, guidelines. AICPA has privacy management assessment framework. There's a lot of great tools that we could follow. But it looks like you're actually working pretty diligently to gut through some of these questions on your own. And I'd hate to say reinvent the wheel, but are you following or trying to go through some of these guidelines and frameworks that maybe already have been created?
Truth be told, we're looking to comply with the ordinance. So that's, we're looking, that is our touchstone. That is what we're trying to comply with. I mean, obviously, I'm happy to look to other things. And I know Mr. Hofer has offered his assistance as well.
Okay, well, those other things have things like key performance indicators. You mentioned a number of, in your responses, information may be provided to law enforcement. What is law enforcement? What kind of key performance indicators might happen as to who actually gets this data in the future, so we can go back and understand what has transpired and what has not transpired. A little bit, as our chairman mentioned too, as we change technology and go from one period to the next, we can then monitor what actually happens based upon what we all agree are the key performances that we're looking for.
It's a good segue. I just have one, and I know Pega has a follow-up. Related to, we're just trying to follow the ordinance here. It's new. There's a lot of things that aren't necessarily completely clear. Even if we kind of saw things the same way, even if there's so many concerns that came up that just don't seem to comply with the ordinance, right? There's a 15-day retention period, but the use policy doesn't say how that data is purged. It just says it's going to be purged. When I think under data sharing, when you talked about investigative purposes, the ordinance requires that also included is required justification or legal standard necessary. So like kind of hands are tied in that sense. And I just, is there a way out? I mean, I know many times we propose just sitting down because we have issues with that as it pertains to the ordinance, and we'd love to just sit down and hash out a couple of those to at least get to a state where we can consider that. But there's so many issues with that. And like you mentioned, Brian Hofer has also offered to sit down and break those down as well. Is there a way we can get to the point where even if there was some understanding, there aren't just so many issues with comporting with the ordinance?
And it depends on flexibility with timelines. Obviously, we want to make sure we're doing our part to meet our diligence. And the answer is it depends. We want to make sure that we're trying to push out, forgive me, better spoken, employ this technology in a way that helps us to seek justice for victims, to solve crimes. And if there's a forum that I want to make sure I'm complying with the Brown Act, that issues are, and this is a new board as well, that these things are vetted out publicly. And I'm here, and I'm happy to answer questions. So that's, I think, is a
You-
good forum for this.
Do you honestly think we have the time to vet every single issue publicly during these meetings?
Well, again, we do have some 70+ technologies to get through as well, so maybe there's some way that we can look at timelines and flexibility on the timelines.
We're certainly interested in working with that. Becca?
Thank you. I'll try to be very quick. So the analogy, this isn't really a question, it's just a statement for everyone, maybe. The analogy that these lights are similar to an officer standing and observing something doesn't really quite hold up, right? I think the analogy is if there's an officer standing at a corner watching me go by, then there's an officer at the next corner watching me go by, and another one at the next corner, and the next one, and the next one. And they all put this into one database. And not only that, but they use that to train additional algorithms, additional recipes, additional ways of monitoring everybody else. So I think that we should be careful when we make that analogy and recognize that expectations of privacy do change. And that as we move on to this untargeted mass surveillance, pervasive way of surveilling our communities, we should be really, really thoughtful. And that's why it's important, I think, for us that all of the things in the ordinance are rock solid, are very clear, right? And that's why we keep asking all these questions, because we want to make sure that everything is spelled out as clearly as humanly possible in these things, because these are where it's sort of like Lee was saying, it's a new frontier. We're not trying to be obstructionist or be, Luddites or anything. We understand that technology is here, but it's very important for the community. It's important for the PD and for the city to show how the cow eats the cabbage, right? That's an important thing. We need to know exactly all the detail. It may be ugly, it may be, we may have questions about it, but we need to know all the details of that. The problem that we have, you've asked, and I think this is fair, you said the board is supposed to make its modifications, recommend modifications. I think that's fair, and I, speaking at least for myself, I tried, but there are certain things I just can't logically give you recommendations about without knowing what the technology is. I can't tell you that it needs to have such and such level of security and put that in your use policy, and that it needs to have, it needs to purge at this level at 15 days, and that your vendor can absolutely never share it with anybody else in any way, shape, or form, if I don't know if that's a technical capability that they have or don't, right? That's where we're stuck, not being able to actually give you any recommendations to how to modify this, because we don't know. I can tell you all kinds of wild things that I'd like for there to be in this thing, and then you'll come back and say that vendor doesn't do that, and there's no vendor that does that. So then we're kind of talking at cross names. Okay, that's it. I didn't have a question.
I have one last question. I'll be very brief. So I appreciate your clarity earlier, in your explanation about your belief that there is no expectation to privacy in public, that it is, to use your words, it's observation, right? You have something out here and put it in your pocket, it's a different story, right? There's a couple of Supreme Court cases, and I've mentioned them several times in these meetings. And what these court cases ruled, Carpenter and Jones, was that when you observe someone over an extended period of time, it's one thing to observe someone and park a car in front of someone's home, but that eventually the officer's not going to stay there. He or she's going to move on. What's different, and what was ruled in Carpenter, is that once you have prolonged observation, you're no longer just making an observation. Now, and especially with this equipment, you are essentially tracking people. So you have the vehicle license reader, you're moving from point A to B to C, and now the criteria has changed, or the practice has changed from observation to looking at someone through an extended geographical network, and the level of detail that the cameras admitted or that also yield as well. These are high definition cameras, right? So I think they could probably read the time on your watch if they were used in a certain way. So my question for you, I'll make it really simple, is based on what the court has ruled, and this was in reference to GPS and cell phones, and now we're talking about cameras and vehicle license readers. Do you think this constitutes a form of tracking? Is it just, are we just talking about observation, or I'm just curious to hear your thoughts, or might this also be considered a form of tracking? And if it is a Fourth Amendment issue. So I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are.
I'm really glad you asked. So the thing is, everything has its limit. So the cell site location information, all of us carry around cell phones. I mean, the majority of people have them, smartphones. The cell phone is sending out location, is trying to find cell towers probably up to 100 plus times a day. And so the Fourth Amendment, again, doesn't prohibit all searches, just unreasonable ones. The reason the cell site location information becomes a track, as you put it, is because of the fact that the cell site information is so constant, so persistent, so pervasive, as opposed to, say, a point in time camera, and the vehicle moves on. So, and then with the tracking, the tracker that was placed on the vehicle, that too is a case that they actually used kind of English common law trespass. We're physically on the property, but technology evolves and gets better, as you were saying. And so the fact with the trackers, they use the English common law idea of trespass onto the property. But then again, that constant, unending, unyielding surveillance is an affront to the Fourth Amendment. I think there was another case of the beautiful struggle. Forgive me if I'm not getting it wrong. There was a town where the police department thought it would be a good idea to fly drones for 12 hours a day,
Baltimore, yeah.
surveilling 90% of 650,000 people. So that case, obviously the court said, hey, the police department said it's only daytime. But the court said you can move the track back to the front door. And so the level of specificity, persistence, and constancy is offensive to the Fourth Amendment. The technology to be employed here, I mean, again, I'm not looking to have a camera on every corner, is point in time. It is a snapshot of a moment. It is not an amalgamation like cell site location information where my every movement, because there's a study, I can't remember where I read it, that we're never more than 6 feet away from our phones, and they're a good proxy for us as individuals. So the level of pervasiveness, the level of constancy, the level of continuousness is not met by the streetlight cameras. So that's the difference.
And I guess my concern with your statement is that we're talking about 500 cameras. So there are hundreds of points that make it appear that it is tracking, but I'll leave it there. I don't want to belabor, but that's a concern I have.
Will be closing comments. If so, we'll move on to a vote if there is a motion for that. Any closing comments? Just a few seconds, 10, 20 seconds. Then at this point, I think we appreciate you guys for coming here, for your service, for taking the heat figuratively and literally.
And metaphorically.
I think that's all that we have for you today. Thank you.
And just, folks, I appreciate your work. I mean no one any offense. I respect your position. I respect your dogged defense of the Constitution. I'm in the same business. So I mean no one any offense, and I appreciate your work. Thank you for your time and your scholarship.
Just want to remind the board, if there is a vote on a motion, we are required per our bylaws, not per ordinance, 2/3 of the appointed members. So at least there'd be 6 of the 8 in this case. Unanimously to pass. Otherwise, we would default to no recommendation.
I'd like to make a quick closing statement. I just want to point out, and hopefully it'll be in the notes, how kind of absurd may be too harsh, but how absurd it is that an issue with the magnitude that this is having, a technology that we don't understand, that our questions end up being confined to, what time we have to leave. But I'm also hoping that all of our board members understand that this really, I think, is, and part of the reasons we have so many questions is this is really a historical moment, and that there are a lot of people who are very concerned about these technologies, and there's a lot of people who are very concerned about these technologies in the hands of their mothers and brothers and sisters, but even more so in the hands of police. And so I hope we all consider that. Because we have to ask ourselves how much, if we say that surveillance is the answer to crime, if technology is the answer to not enough police officers, then I think the question we have to ask is, well, how much surveillance is going to be okay? When will we stop asking to put more cameras up? And I think the question that we should also be asking ourselves, and this is it, I promise, is will the police department, regardless of what a recommendation comes from here, will the police department move forward despite your appreciation for all of us with your recommendation from City College Council and the mayor, even with a no recommendation from this body?
Was that a question? Okay.
As a closing comment, we're willing to work further with you. I think we've seen that during these meetings, we are pushed to the max limit of our time slots. So we are willing to work with you. Any conclusions we come to, or any changes that we would suggest would be willing to be made public. So it's not a matter of the interest of transparency. We're willing to make all this transparent, just within the confines of what we can reasonably work with. You can answer that one if you want.
Our objective is to be reasonable. Our objective is to be collaborative. And again, answering the 111 questions hopefully is indicative of our level of wanting to answer the questions. I mean, we may not, agree on the answers, but we are very much interested in answering the questions. So thank you.
I'd like to move for a vote to reject the proposal before us. My fancy words aren't working. Hopefully that was clear. Option number 2. So it would be a yes vote. It would be a vote to send option number 2 forward to the council, is my proposal.
And just if we do this, just a point of clarification, I'd like at least a couple of minutes to explain my position before we do that. I don't know if we can do it after or before, but I think the public deserves a rationale for our vote for the record. So I second colleagues' motion to vote, but I want to have comments first.
I think we want to keep comments before the vote. Please, if you have any closing comments as we vote, go ahead.
Okay.
Please keep it within less than a minute.
I'll try to keep it short. So I want everyone to know this is a historic moment. No other city in the United States is voting to have this number of cameras. So there's a precedent that's being set here. And what I'd like to emphasize, going back to what we heard from the department today, the issue is there an expectation to privacy? For me, there's lots of things that came up here, and I think most of you understood my point, which is it's not just mere observation. When you're tracking people through space and time, when you're collecting details, now the criteria has changed. The court has ruled this in a Carpenter case, and it ruled this in Jones. And the question is, even though the court hasn't ruled on this specific technology, right, we have an important role here, a democratic process. We don't need to wait for the Supreme Court. We can set a precedent here in this board, and we can send a message to the court. We can send a message to other cities. And so the foundation has been laid by the Supreme Court. It has given us some guidance. It hasn't ruled on this, but as someone put it last time, just because we could doesn't mean we should, right? So I want everyone just to think seriously about the Fourth Amendment. For me, this is a big issue. It's a compromise potentially of our Fourth Amendment right. And in my view, I'll sum this up. We're not talking about mere observation. We're talking about tracking people. And that's essentially what we're signing off for today.
I'd like to make a statement too. We live in a world today where there's already an imbalance of power, and modern AI-powered surveillance technologies are effectively a weapon. They should be seen as a weapon, as a munition, and they shouldn't be underestimated because they can change and shift the balance of power. And currently, the viewpoint about this is that certainly they have benefits to things like law enforcement, and we can mitigate the risk by kind of putting cages or safeguards around them. But I would stipulate that we know and understand so little about the power of this technology at this time that we don't even know really what these safeguards should be and how they would work and how well they would do at mitigating risks. Even the law hasn't caught up with AI-based technology, and we're left guessing. We don't even know what all the threat vectors are. We know that mission creep happens. And so we should be very, very careful in it moving forwards. one of the difficulty with weapons is they can point in different directions depending on who wields them. And who wields them changes with time. History says that politics change and people change, and things that you are pointing at others can end up being pointed at you. I hope this is not too exaggerated or colorful, but I wonder if any of you have seen the Alien series of movies. It's about these awful aliens and powerful destructive creatures. But in one of those movies, the government or the army wants to harness their power. And to do that, they catch a couple of them and put them in a cage for observation. As you can guess, they break out of the cage and havoc wreaks. So why is this relevant here? Because we are trying to build these cages. And I don't know that we know how to build a cage that's powerful enough to contain these unless we wait and understand more about them. And finally, when it comes to how we want to move forward in society and with regard to crime, there's an old...
Here, can we just...
Done?
Yeah, just a few seconds if you have.
There's an old Buddhist saying that says, work at the root. And I think the root lies in our social ills and inequities. And law enforcement is important, but I would wish we could balance it with more work at the root.
I just want to put forward, it's our duty to kind of act on behalf of the public and to ensure that the ordinance is being followed. There's just a lot of questions, and maybe the path forward here is to see what we can modify so that we feel good that it's actually comporting with the ordinance. Again, we're willing to do more than a document that gets responded to twice. Let's work closely in good faith here if possible. Thank you. Let's do it for a vote. A yes on this vote would be a yes to the rejection option number 2. Khalid?
Yes, on sending number 2 forward to council.
Be here?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Sid?
Yes.
Pega?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. The record show the vote was unanimous among appointed members, 6-0. Option 2 as written will be sent forward to City Council. Thank you, everybody. Without further ado, we'll move to adjournment. I raise a motion to adjourn. All opposed, all 4?
Yes.
All right, see you guys.